Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Megan Leday. I'm an LCSW. I'm Lightfully's Vice President of Adolescent Services, and I'll be your host this afternoon. It's afternoon everywhere in the United States, so that's great. At Lightfully, our mission is changing lives compassionately. And entwined in that and ingrained in that mission is a commitment to gender inclusive and informed care. So, with that in mind, I am so thrilled to be joined by Casey Weitzman. She's an LMFT and a member of Lightfully's Clinical Advisory Board. She's the president and founder of Gender Wellness in Los Angeles. Recently, Casey contributed to a blog post for us about parents or for parents who are considerations. Sorry, for parents about considerations that they should have when their child is wrestling with their gender identity and how gender identity impacts their mental health. Casey, thanks for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm so excited you're here. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and about gender wellness?
Well, I'm a native California girl, and I started Gender Wellness about 20 years ago because I found there needed to be a need for providers that could be empathic and compassionate. And I kind of fell into it when I was still before I got licensed. So that was over 31 years ago. And it's just been a learning experience, but really exciting. I have other clinicians and other staff, and I see individuals, couples, families. I'm starting a group tonight for parents of trans and non-binary kids. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. How many clinicians do you have on staff?
Right now, there's just two besides me. And then I have a full-time assistant, which you've met Julie doing.
Yeah.
And then we have a web person. And so we are going to continue to grow. But during the pandemic, it really changed things up because I had just built a suite of offices in West LA and then had to shut it down. And sort of, when you say things like, I'll never live in a certain place and I'll never see clients at my house, and all of that changed. So I've been seeing people outside all during the pandemic. And I think that made it very helpful for a lot of families because a lot of youth wanted to see clinicians in person. They were tired of doing everything over telehealth. So
yes, I agree. I'm so glad that you're able to see people back face to face. That's so nice. So let's talk a little bit about the article that you wrote that's on Lightfully's blog right now that I fumbled the name of so badly just earlier. So in the article, you really highlight the connection of LGBTQ plus teens and mental health, and that rates of depression and suicidality and hopelessness are just really staggering. What do you think makes this group of folks more susceptible to mental health struggles?
Well, I want to say we're being more picked on now than ever is one thing. Because before the last 5 years, I felt like we were making so many strides forward that there was much more acceptance and which again, I'm not going to say that it's totally negative because so many great things have happened, but I think more people are being bullied and picked on, and there's so many negative messages about LGBTQ people. And then if you're talking about even transgender, non-binary, it's just even so much worse through legislation and bills and all the things that are going on in social media. And so what I've seen is kids are struggling so much more now with severe depression, anxiety, gender dysphoria, not wanting to go to school. It has been probably the most difficult time for youth that I've ever seen.
Wow. And you said that's really within the past 5 years that you felt like that's happened.
Yes.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
feel like the pandemic has exacerbated that further?
Well, in some ways, the pandemic made more young people kind of get more in touch
Mm,
with who they are, and they could
yeah.
see positive shows now, and they could see, social media. Obviously, there's mixed, but there was a lot of positive where they could see stories more about themselves. Because a lot of parents will say to me, "How come it happened during the pandemic?" And then there's also negative about, well, it's a phase, they're following their friends, things like this. But really, no one wants to be transgender. I mean, no one wakes up one day and says, I think this is going to be an easy lifestyle for me. And I really want to do this. It is a painful coming out process, very different than being gay or lesbian.
Can you speak to some of those differences between the coming out process between the transgender folks and gay and lesbian folks?
Well, it's interesting because sort of what I'll see is that they might start saying, a lot of youth will say, I'm bisexual. That
Okay.
tends to be the way in which they start the process. And then they might live a gay or lesbian lifestyle for a while and then realize, well, that's who I love. But internally, it's more about who I am. And that's the gender identity piece, where it's this realization. And then the whole idea is, now this is who I am. What am I going to do about it?
Mm.
And this coming out is so much different, because many parents will say to me, why can't my kid just be gay?
Oh.
Right? Why can't my kid just be gay? So there's gender dysphoria. There's a lot of self-loathing around their body and their pronouns, and they don't like their name. And knowing that if they come out, the statistics are so much worse, as far as how it's going to be embraced a lot of times by parents. So a lot of my kids will come out to their parents in a text, let's say.
Wow. I mean, that feels like a scared way of coming out.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the way that teens are opting to share this information with families?
Well, because they feel so much shame, embarrassment. They feel the despair, like, who's going to love me? Who's going to accept me? How do I do this? And a lot of the kids that I'm starting to work with are as young as 12 or 13 years old, that already can tell that there's something that's not congruent between, who their assigned gender at birth and then who they are now. And that realization about, who do I tell? Who's going to accept me? And then the social media, what you're seeing in Florida or Alabama or Texas, they're seeing that they're not going to be embraced for being themselves. And so they kind of go back into the closet. And that's where I've seen more cutting, eating disorders. I have a statistic from Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy, who's the medical director of Children's Hospital, that says 50% of trans youth have attempted suicide by the time they're 20 years old.
That just sent chills down my spine. I mean, that's absolutely heartbreaking. How do you think that parents can help? Obviously, parents aren't the only answer to helping that statistic improve. But in the light of our conversation being geared towards that parental-child relationship, in what ways do you think that parents can impact that number?
They are the key to the child's success, because I will tell my parents, support your child no matter what. Even if you don't believe it, you didn't see it coming, I tell them, don't panic. Don't panic. We want to affirm our kids and, like, try not to go down that whole thing of, like, how this is going to impact the whole family. And so the parents are, like, so crucial, because all the statistics show that with parental support, the child has such a great chance of living a more healthy, normal life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you feel, or how do you feel? Obviously, every parent is differently. Are there like universal pillars of supporting a transgender child that you want to impart on parents?
I lost you in the feed. I didn't hear part of what you said.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So I said every parent is going to support their kid differently, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we can be helpfully supportive. And I'm wondering if there are like certain pillars of support that are kind of universally, good for parents to know that you would like to impart on them.
Well, the biggest thing is because a lot of the people, a lot of the youth that I work with now are non-binary, so they don't want to be considered really male or female.
Mhm.
So with parents, the biggest thing is the affirming of, even if you say, well, grammatically, they, them, for example, is not grammatically correct. It's like, okay, great, but I still need you to try. Like we have our pronouns here, asking the child, what is your preferred name and what are your preferred pronouns? And the parents will say, well, I'll make a mistake. And it's like, okay, well, that's all right. Just say you're sorry and then just move on. Like, don't make a big deal out of it. But it could be asking the child, do you want to go and get different clothes? Do you want a binder? Like what can I do to help decrease that gender dysphoria that you're experiencing right now? So it goes a long, long way. And again, like I said, you may not agree with it or think it's a phase, but for right now, just accept the child where they are. We can get help for you. We can get help for your child. There are groups and other resources. But for right now, believe me, by the time they came to tell you, it was not easy. It's something they had to grapple with for a while within themselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you spoke about resources, and we really we started this conversation talking about the status of mental health within this community of people. And so I'm wondering, what sorts of things would you advise a parent to be looking at? Let's say that their kid, needs treatment.
Mhm.
What kind of considerations do you feel are really important for parents to be looking at when they're considering treatment options for their transgender child?
Well, the biggest thing is if the clinician, let's say, has had a lot of experience, right? Has done, that's why I say, like, what kind of experience? Because there's so many considerations now with WPATH, which is the organization called the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, which actually is a good resource. But there's been this kind of philosophy like affirm, affirm, affirm. And I think you should affirm, but you need to ask questions. You got to ask a lot of questions like, tell me more. When did you figure this out? What does this mean to you? How do you see this in your life going forward? Resources, obviously, good articles, support groups, conferences, doctors. There's so many more resources now than there's ever been in the 31 years that I've done this work. There are great places like, colleges here in California. There's UCLA, there's Cedars-Sinai, there's Children's Hospital, there's USC, the Los Angeles LGBT Center. So I'm hoping for the parents, they don't feel so alone. But for so many parents, it can be embarrassing and shameful. What are we going to tell people? We had all these expectations for our child. How is this going to change that up? And it's like, let's just not go down that. Let's not go there right now. Let's just try and support our child and get them services. If they need a higher level of care, then we can talk about that as well. Because I've seen a lot of cutting, a lot of ways in which until they come out and have support, they're doing a lot of it also on social media. And again, we know social media can be really positive, but it can also be a platform for bullying and exploitation.
Yes, yes. And I think the article speaks so beautifully to that. I loved just that whole section where you broke down the um, the light side and the potentially dark side, and how we really have to be able to hold both of those things, which can be really tough when we see some of the bad things. And it really oriented me to like, oh, there are such great things happening for trans kids on social media, though. So it was a nice reflection point for myself. And so for parents, given these complexities, what is your best advice? Because I'm sure that parents are anxious about how they help their kids navigate social media. What sort of advice would you give them around that?
Again, just be affirming, just be supportive. Because you can't take words back. If you say really hurtful things like this is never going to happen, you're not this, just just kind of grin and bear it. It's like that's going to be problematic, but you cannot take words back. So I always say, just take a breath, don't panic. I will help you, or, not just me, but lots of great providers out there of like, here are things you can do. Like this parent support group, it's taken me, I want to say 10 years to start it, but 5 because the parents feel so much shame and embarrassment initially. They don't want support. They want to just be in it. And it's like a secret. Let's not tell people. What we're finding is the more people, the kids come out, and the parents sometimes after a short amount of time become more supportive than the child. Like, let's get going. Let's get you a binder. Do you want to what do you want to do? Do you want to start doing a social transition? Do you want me to tell the school? Should we figure out bathrooms? So sometimes the kids will say, will you please tell my parents to slow down? Like, I just came out. I'm not ready to start dressing differently or using a different name. So sometimes it's just the parents are really, I'm just so pleased with so many of the parents that I've come across in the last couple of years. I really have.
That's amazing. It's just so wonderful to know that you're making that sort of impact, not just on the kids, but on families, which is so important for trans kids. And Lightfully, we're
definitely
on that same page of really feeling like family involvement is so important.
Another thing I was going to say is they need to get educated, right? There are really good and there are terrible books, but there are many really good books. And of course, one of my favorite books is by Dr. Paria Hasari. She also is, the book's called Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. And she's in charge of the Pediatric and Adolescent Gender Wellness Clinic at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center.
Wow.
And she wrote this book and is doing this work because she didn't immediately come to terms with her own child. She did not believe her 13 or 14-year-old child initially. And as a pediatric doctor, so I'm just trying to say to parents, like even a pediatric doctor missed it and had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. So it's just like, listen to your child, give yourself time. But like I said, there are really good resources out there. And one of the things I really love about Lightfully, if they need a higher level of care, is you guys don't just talk the talk, but you walk the walk. And it's like you're affirming, you're doing the pronouns. When I went to visit one of your facilities, I saw all these flags, all these gay and lesbian flags. And it was like, welcome, we embrace you, which I found so great because a lot of these kids may need a higher level of care, just to kind of deal with the depression and the anxiety and the suicidality. So that's why I'm so excited. And that's why I am on the advisory board, because you guys are walking the walk and talking the talk.
Well, that's really great to hear. Really great to hear. So let's talk a little bit. I could talk about the social media piece of this just like all day, because I think that it's so, there are so many different angles that we could look at it for. Do you think that parents need to monitor their kids' social media accounts?
I do. I do.
Okay.
I do. And I'm smiling because of a conversation I had with Dr. Siegfried, obviously, who's your clinical, your title. What's the title?
Chief Clinical Officer.
And we were laughing about it because the whole idea about social media, and my parents like, oh no, I trust my child. It's like, okay, but we don't know if they're being exploited, all these Discord groups that kids are in. So the monitoring is Facebook, Instagram, just making sure that, what they're doing, what they're reading, is appropriate and helpful. I love that. Like I said, I think there are good things on there, but I do feel like there's a lot of exploitation and bullying going on. And my parents, I tell them, let's do this. And I think a lot of times the kids are actually happy that their parents are doing it because these kids need structure. They still need guidance. They act like they're sort of sophisticated at the age of 17, but they don't know everything. So
Yeah.
I do believe it. And I love Nicole's philosophy about maybe taking a week off from social media, or that we're not going to have it at the dinner table. I've asked a family this week to do that. They looked at me like I was out of my mind. But I said, listen, you can't be on it either. You don't want your kids to be on social media? You can't be on it either. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you advise a family to navigate that conversation with a teen about monitoring? Because I'll be honest, I totally thought you were going to say no. I don't think that they should, and I'm just delighted by your stance that you think it's that important that parents need that sort of oversight. I think you're absolutely right. And I could see how teens might find that to be an invasion of privacy if the conversation isn't breached in a way that is transparent. So how would you tell parents to navigate that?
Just, first of all, they can do it without their child knowing, right? Because we know there's parental controls, and I don't recommend that, but to let your child know, listen, I'm not going to go on it all the time, but I do want to let you know I need your passwords. And I'm going to, once in a while, I'm going to go in there. And I have parents, kids have gotten a little mad at me because, like, why did you tell my parents that was okay? And I was like, listen, it's about keeping you safe. Because for a lot of clients that are now coming out as, let's say, trans feminine, or, and they're out in public or whatever, it's like, I need your parents to know what you're doing, where you are, what's going on. So I say, just let them know that I'm going to be doing it, and they get really mad and whatever, but at least it gives them a sense of it's a possibility. So I am going to overlook your shoulder sometime because you're not 18. When you're 18, maybe something else, but not before that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. That's really great advice for parents to hear. One of the, and I think this has been, you've mentioned it so many times, right? This idea of unconditional support, that we don't have to have all the answers right now, but that the parents' main goal is unconditional support of their child as they are in this moment. Yeah. And sometimes we say things wrong because we're humans. And so what would you tell a parent who maybe has gotten it wrong recently, said something, like you said, you can't take back words. How would you tell a parent to start that repair process if they've recognized that the words that they've said aren't, they weren't in their best moment, and they need to start repairing?
It's so refreshing if a parent can say, I'm sorry, I messed up, me bad, I didn't have the education, I'm going to read. Because a lot of parents now, everything they've learned now with this affirming is that kids are going straight to hormones, surgeries. And I assure them with me that, or with gender wellness, that this isn't going to happen overnight, that we're going to spend time. So it's like, like I said, saying you're sorry goes a long way. I don't remember my parents saying they were sorry very often. So if you just say, "Oh my God," the other thing I do is I get a cookie jar. Every time the parent misgenders the child, they have to put $1 into this cookie jar. So there's that awareness of like, oh shoot, I messed up, but I'm gonna be better. And the part about getting therapy for themselves, and just they're human. It is grieving and loss for these families. They imagined a different life for these kids. And so there's that readjustment. A lot of times the kids will say, I don't want that picture of myself on the mantle. And sometimes the parents are crushed. And so there always has to be kind of a compromise. And again, even if the kids initially are so demanding, it's like they will relax too. I also tell the kids, you got to give your parents time, that you've known about this for a while, but they're just finding out about it and they're scared, so just really, I give the parents a lot of credit, because what I've watched years later or months later is something has clicked that's changed with the parents. I see them going shopping together. I see them doing makeup. I see them, like just really being like their biggest allies. So yeah, parents are human. I totally get it. It can be crushing, disappointing. They're in disbelief. But I just say, hang in there. We don't know exactly where this is going, but as long as a child knows that they have you guys or you, it really can make the difference between almost life and death.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think that's an overstatement in any capacity. So I know that you were coming up on the end of our time together.
Already?
We are, I know. But there's one thing that I really want you to speak to before we end. And I think it's this idea that we can start in such small ways, right? To affirm our kids. And so if for a parent who maybe isn't sure where to begin, can you share some ways that they might be able to instill gender inclusivity and acceptance of gender identity into their family culture?
Oh, that's such a good question. Again, sort of like we're doing the she, her, I'm wearing a little flag, could be posters, more LGBT, fortunately, again, I don't know, obviously this is probably everywhere, but California, they have all these GSAs, there's PFLAG, there's so many more opportunities now for both kids and their families to get educated. And there's wonderful conferences, there's things like Gender Odyssey, Transforming Family, where both the kids can get support and the parents can get support. So again, it's really just affirming it. I'm telling you, nothing more than if they say, this is the name I want to use, that's the other thing. Kids will start with one name, they'll change the name, and the parents are like, wait, I was just getting used to it. It's like, I know, Mom, I'm going through this, and the pronouns. And if you get them right, they will hug and kiss on you like, thank you so much, because you're respecting them and you're taking them seriously. And also coming out to other members, it's the same thing. It's like, it may not go easy, but as long as you are your kid's number one ally, that's what's going to go so far.
That's such a powerful message. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to chat. I absolutely adored it. I hope that we can continue talking someday in the future. Great.
So much for having me. Thanks.
Yes, thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope to see everyone soon. Have a great day.